How does the unresolved rhythm of a city teach a person to live with uncertainty? Published on 19th of June 2026, the piece considers how the unpredictable nature of New Orleans and the jazz that defines it can reshape a person's neurological response to trauma. The story follows a newcomer who arrived in the city only to be met with near-death experiences and personal setbacks. It moves past simple memoir to look at recent scientific findings on how improvisational music encourages mental elasticity. The city's refusal to offer safety becomes a lesson in moving with dissonance rather than trying to resolve it. Written by Henrik Karolishan in Psyche, narrated for Ava. On the first seasonably warm afternoon of my new life in New Orleans, I sat beneath a tree near Bayou St. John with a six-pack of a beta, a folded newspaper, and the naive belief that geography alone could repair whatever felt fractured inside me. Everything about the city was foreign to me then. The oppressive heat, the Cajun vowels stitched into conversation, the disarming friendliness that confused a man raised on New York suspicion. A week earlier, I'd uprooted myself for a newspaper job that already showed signs of deterioration. A crumbling newsroom, shaky leadership, the unmistakable aura of decline. It would be only a harbinger of things to come for the publication, and my place in it. But that Saturday felt like a clean slate. Magnolia drifted. Somewhere in the distance, a brass band warmed up, the horns expanding like a sonorous engine. I cracked a beer, opened the paper, and tried to believe I'd made a sane decision. Minutes later, my skin erupted in welts the size of walnuts. My throat tightened. My vision fogged. Some panicked instinct made me rip off my shirt and fling myself into the bayou, an act no self-respecting New Orleanian would endorse. I clawed my way back onto the bank, gasping as the world turned into thinning beams of daylight. At 2 Lanes ER, a doctor slid steroids into my arm and told me I barely survived fire ant anaphylaxis, a full-body allergic shutdown triggered by the bite of a red ant, apparently the South's preferred way of instructing the uninitiated, as if it were a curse cast upon Yankee transplants who felt too confident in their own immunity. If you'd waited another hour, the doctor said, you'd be dead. I was 1 week into my new life, and the city was already telling me to go home. Instead, I stayed long enough to learn that New Orleans speaks in a different register. It doesn't promise safety, it offers improvisation. And the vehicle for me to follow its wild tempo was its most well-known commodity, jazz. It wasn't just a soundtrack, it became a neurological and emotional roadmap out of the darkness. Jazz arose in New Orleans from a rich tapestry of disparate musical traditions, with a sonic fusion of African rhythms, European harmonic structures, Caribbean melodies and Delta blues. The complex soundscape did not adhere to a single form or note. Instead, it grew from merging, meandering and reinventing motifs in real time through the city's streets, within its dance halls and along its riverbanks. Improvisation became less a stylistic choice and more a natural strategy for survival and a fluid response to unpredictable circumstances, whether it be the shifting moods of its second-line band members, variable reactions from crowds, or restrictions of time and space. The genre was fueled by flexibility. Jazz, with all its unruly curvatures, remains shorthand for adaptability. We talk about riffing on an idea, improvising through a setback, finding the groove with another person. In New Orleans, this verbiage is not solely metaphor. The same neurological motherboard that helps a musician navigate a solo, attention, emotional regulation, social attunement, is precisely what gets overloaded and falters under trauma, anxiety, and depression. Jazz asks the brain to stay awake inside unpredictability rather than retreat from it. Pain researchers have even started noticing the way jazz can shape the brain's response to discomfort. A pilot study from the University of California, Irvine in 2025 found that people who mindfully listened to improvisational jazz had sharper reductions in chronic musculoskeletal pain and anxiety than people who listened to other music. The study's authors suggested that the spontaneity of jazz improvisation might help listeners to similarly live in the moment and reduce anxiety. Jazz can shake the mind loose. None of this registered with me back then. All I felt was dislocation. The newsroom reneged on promises, my relationship grew claustrophobic, depression felt heavier. Strangers asked where I went to high school, not as small talk, but as a census of belonging. In Queens, you keep to yourself. In New Orleans, they examine your biography for clues of kinship. Even the hustlers got in on it. "I bet I can tell you where you got your shoes," a man shouted in Jackson Square. I ignored him. "On your feet."
"On Bourbon Street," he called after me. A jostle, a joke, a riff at my expense. Soon I became sleepless. Insomnia is what pushed me deeper into music. I listened obsessively to Wayne Shorter's Speak No Evil, 1966, which opened nocturnal portals in my brain. Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Jazz to Come offered freedom to hold melody while abandoning certainty. Charles Mingus's The Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, 1963, felt like a fever dream. Shortly, nights were filled with Pharoah Sanders, Eric Dolphy, Jackie McLean, Coltrane, Cecil Taylor, Miles. It was both escape and anchor. I acquired 4 stitches in my head and another bill I couldn't afford. I fled the city, convinced it had put a hex on me. Eventually, I took my insomnia outside. I started haunting Frenchman Street jazz clubs, sanctuaries where an ear-hungry overthinker could click into the present, no matter what time it was. One night at the Spotted Cat, watching a quartet bob and weave through volatile riffs, something inside me recognised a quieter version of myself emerging. I walked home feeling almost human. That didn't last. On my way to meet a friend the next day in mid-city, I fainted on a sidewalk, cracked my skull open and dislocated my shoulder. Back at 2 Lanes ER, I acquired 4 stitches in my head, a sling and another bill I couldn't afford. I fled the city quickly after, convinced it had put a hex on me. But New Orleans never really lets you leave. I returned for a woman I'd met on assignment in the lower 9th Ward, who would eventually become my wife. At first, we lived in a shotgun house in the Marigny, close enough to hear brass bands hijack a Tuesday night, and far enough to retreat from the nearby French Quarter's noise. I joined a Crew du Vieux subcrew, one of the satirical Mardi Gras walking parades, and built papier-mâché floats mocking corrupt politicians. I drank too much, then not at all. I ran marathons, lost 80 pounds. I bartended, did construction, ghost wrote, became a private investigator, went back to school. Reinvention wasn't healing exactly, but in a city powered by rebirth and second chances, it was the most natural thing to do. New Orleans, with its danger and beauty, broke open my brain the only way that ever works, loudly and without permission. Jazz musicians do it nightly. Try something, listen, adjust, try again. Without realising it, my brain was learning the same thing. This type of improvisation is a form of surrender.
Not passive, but attentive. A willingness to stay inside a chord that hasn't resolved. New Orleans taught me this through late nights at DBA, a music bar in Frenchman Street, saxophones looping through damp air, twisting to words, sounds and weather patterns. Through night runs on Crescent Park with the Mississippi moving alongside. Through afternoons at Marky's Bar with Jesus' Son open on the table. Through the company of people who hadn't chosen the city for its gentleness, but for its singularity. Gradually, the challenges of the city and its many dysfunctional qualities stopped feeling like threats and started to feel like cues. When the August heat became too much, we would drive to Florida for the weekend. As Mardi Gras season approached, unplanned costumes would emerge from our closets. During Jazz Fest, we walked into the musical hodgepodge without a set plan. When I stopped trying to overthink, New Orleans felt like home. When I began listening carefully, it felt like peace. New Orleans, with its danger and beauty, broke open my brain the only way that ever works, loudly and without permission. The heat, the storms, the strangers all conspired to teach the same lesson. You are not alone. People say I love you here with startling frequency, in grocery aisles, across bar stools, outside corner stores. Maybe it's hurricanes, maybe it's melody, maybe it's another improvisation, insisting that connection is still possible. I've never become a full convert. I dislike most parades. I will never be a Saints fan. Crawfish are nauseating. King cake is overrated. None of it matters. New Orleans is where misfits are heard, a place that offers belonging that has nothing to do with what you drive or where you spend your mornings. Mostly, I love the sound of jazz, and knowing that at any hour someone will be playing an unrehearsed tune that will linger. Years after the fire ant episode, my partner and I bought a house in the neighbourhood where I nearly died. One afternoon I walked past the tree by Bayou St. John. 12 years had passed. The water shimmered in its dull, tranquil green. Joggers crossed the Cabrini Bridge, headphones bouncing. I opened an Abita and kept walking as ornate Coleman spilled into my ears. Wild, unresolved, vivid. That's when I understood the lesson the city had given me. Life doesn't need to resolve. Dissonance isn't failure.
The work is not escaping uncertainty, but learning to move with it, to find meaning inside the chord that refuses to land. The city that nearly killed me eventually taught me how to live.